Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. Rain tapped on the windows like fingers drumming a restless rhythm. The city smelled of wet asphalt and coffee, the neon reflecting off puddles like fractured stars. I had just moved in, another apartment, another floor, another attempt to rebuild myself after he left, after the divorce, after the months I spent untangling memories that weren't mine to keep. The first night I noticed it, a voice, soft, tentative, a whisper that mirrored my thoughts. I froze in the middle of the kitchen. "Hello," I said aloud. Silence. Only the hum of the refrigerator answered. I shook my head, told myself I was tired. Stress, moving, loneliness. The voice was my own imagination. But it wasn't. By the second night, the voice knew things no one else could. My childhood nickname, whispered as I washed my hands. The fear I had never told anyone about. That deep shame I had confessed once in a journal I thought long forgotten. Every thought I tried to hold private, repeated softly back to me from the corner of the room. I pressed my palms against my ears. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself. But the words didn't convince me. It started asking questions. Calm, observing. Emotionally intelligent. Invasive. "Why are you staring at that photo again?" it said one night. "You don't want to remember, do you?" I spun around. Empty apartment. Shadows crawling along the walls, neon from the street lamp cutting across the floor. My heartbeat filled the silence. Weeks later, I met him. My neighbor, Jacob. Warm, attentive, quiet. He asked how I was settling in, smiled at my awkward jokes, noticed the small habits I hadn't yet recognized in myself. He listened, really listened. "You're cautious," he said one evening, leaning against the railing of the stairwell. "But there's curiosity under it. I can see it." I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. Maybe I was lonely, and maybe someone finally understood me. But the voice in my apartment didn't disappear. It only grew bolder. One night, as I lay in bed listening to the rain tapping the windows, it said, "You trust him, don't you? You think he's safe?" I froze, heart hammering. The words weren't mine, and yet they were. I started noticing impossible things. Jacob knew my routines before I told him. The cafes I liked, the playlists I listened to when cooking, even the way I tucked my hair behind my ear when I was anxious. My old nickname from college, never shared, slipped into casual conversation. He laughed at a story only I had written in my journal. "I'm probably overthinking," I whispered to myself one night, staring at my reflection in the window as neon colors danced across the glass. But my chest tightened. Something was wrong. The apartment had begun to change. Floorboards creaked when I knew no one had walked there. Doors I had locked were ajar in the morning. Emails appeared in my inbox I had never sent. Drafts with metadata showing times and locations I hadn't been. Voice notes on my phone in a voice that mimicked mine, saying things I hadn't said aloud. And then the whisper started giving instructions. "Open the closet," it said one night. "Check the panel behind the bookshelf." I shook. "No," I whispered. "I won't." Curiosity gnawed at me. By the next night, I moved the bookshelf. Behind it, a small panel, almost invisible. Trembling hands slid it open. The darkness inside smelled of dust, metal, and stale air. I found a room. Hidden. Tiny. Screens everywhere, dozens of monitors showing footage of the apartment, the streets outside, my movements. Jacob's voice came through speakers, calm, soothing. "You're careful, observant." I admire that. I wanted to vomit. I ran, called the police. They arrived minutes later, but Jacob had vanished. Evidence on the monitors, metadata, burner phones, fake social media profiles, all pointed to months of stalking, obsession, and careful planning. Not just me, other victims, other apartments, other lives cataloged and observed. Weeks later, I returned, bracing myself. The room was gone, the panel replaced by wall. Everything was cleaned, but I could still feel him everywhere, in reflections, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the rhythm of the rain against the windows. I moved again. Smaller apartment, higher floor. Safer streets. I tried to reclaim ordinary life. Coffee, work, music. But the whisper never fully left. I hear it sometimes soft, patient, invasive. A reminder that boundaries can be breached, that identity can be observed and cataloged without consent, and that safety is a fragile construct. Trust, I learned, is never guaranteed. Privacy never absolute. Memory, once observed, becomes another form of surveillance. And obsession is patient, subtle, and devastatingly intelligent. I survived. I rebuilt. But I am not the same. Because once someone has cataloged your mind, even the silence of your apartment is never truly your own. And sometimes, when the rain taps the windows just right, I hear a whisper from the corner of the room, soft, familiar, and impossible to ignore. Story 2. It was 2 a.m. when I first noticed it, a flickering glow beneath the basement door. Rain tapped the windows, staccato rhythms on glass, neon from the corner store slicing through puddles on the street. I'd been awake, staring at the apartment ceiling, the silence thick as fog, thinking about my divorce, the empty cupboards, the way the fridge hummed like a patient witness to my solitude. I told myself it was nothing. Wiring. A bulb from the basement, maybe. But every time I moved closer, the light seemed to shift, retreating just out of reach. I heard whispers, soft, trembling, like someone crying. But when I spoke, the apartment remained empty, except for the usual hums. The fridge, the radiator, the occasional creak of floorboards that weren't mine. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe imagination. I had moved here to start over. New city, new apartment, new life. My last relationship had left a bruise on my trust, my sense of safety. I walked the streets during the day, observing reflections in wet windows, cafes steaming, the quiet comfort of strangers, neon signs flickering in puddles. But nights were different. Nights were mine, and yet I didn't feel like I owned them. Then I met Clara. She was at the cafe where I spent mornings alone, nursing a latte, reading the same worn paperback over and over. She noticed the way I stared at the rain outside, at the reflections, the way I stirred my coffee absent-mindedly. "You always sit here?" she asked, voice calm, observing. I nodded. She smiled carefully, like someone reading a page in a book I hadn't opened yet. She remembered the name I used on my coffee cup, my favorite mug, the song I hummed softly when no one was around. Small things I hadn't mentioned, but she knew. I wanted to believe her. I told myself it made sense. For a few weeks, Clara's presence was comforting. We met often, walked in rain-soaked streets, shared quiet conversations over soft jazz drifting from speakers. I felt safe, almost whole, until the light. It became routine. Each night, around 2 a.m., a flicker beneath the basement door. Whispers. Sometimes my name, sometimes indistinct sobbing. I would move toward it. Every time I reached for the handle, the glow danced away. Shadows stretched longer, twisted strangely, following me. I tried rationalizing. Wiring. Reflection from streetlights. The building settling. I wanted to believe it. One night, I stayed awake waiting. My phone buzzed, notification from a burner email I barely used. He's watching. I froze. The apartment hummed around me. The fridge, the radiator, the distant sirens, my own shallow breathing. I told myself it was coincidence, but a cold knot settled in my chest. Then the music started, a soft, irregular tapping from the basement. Footsteps? No, something else. I crept toward the door, hand hovering above the knob. The glow intensified, revealing faint shapes dancing across the threshold. I reached in. Nothing. Empty. Except for the mirror on the wall. And the reflection behind me. I spun. Empty. The apartment was silent. But the reflection remained. Someone, or something, stood just beyond me in the glass, blurry, impossible, human-shaped but wrong. My heart pounded. I told myself I was imagining it. Exhaustion. Stress. Isolation. Trauma. Days passed. Clara noticed. "You're tense," she said. "You're not sleeping?" She touched my hand lightly, careful, attentive. She knew my routine, my fears, the small rituals I clung to. How I folded my hands before coffee, the way I tucked the blanket around my shoulders. She knew things no one should. I wanted to believe her. I told myself I was overthinking. The whispers escalated. At first, subtle murmurs. Then coherent sentences. "Don't trust him. Don't answer. He's closer than you think." My apartment felt smaller, tighter. The fridge's hum became a pulse, syncing with my heartbeat. Floorboards creaked under invisible weight. I began leaving notes to myself, marking times and observations, trying to distinguish reality from fear. Then came the emails, from unknown addresses. Photos of me in my apartment, reflections of my routines. Metadata intact. Burner phone messages. AI-generated voice notes reading fragments of my thoughts. Clara, she never seemed surprised by any of it. She knew. She listened. Calm, patient, observant. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. I told myself it made sense. Weeks spiraled. The basement door became a focal point. The flicker, the whispers. I tried recording it. Nothing appeared. Cameras, motion sensors, none of it captured the glow. Only I could see it, hear it, feel it. And then I noticed changes in Clara. Subtle, careful. She always knew when I'd planned to leave the apartment. She suggested routes I hadn't shared, intersected my path in impossible ways. She hummed songs I had only ever whispered alone. She called me by childhood nicknames I had buried. I froze in disbelief. Staring at her, I whispered, "How do you know?" Her smile was patient, calm, manipulative. "I've always noticed," she said. "You don't have to explain." I wanted to believe her. I told myself I was overreacting. The climax came unexpectedly. One night, the basement door was ajar. The light flickered violently. Whispers now screamed, "You can't hide. He's here." I opened the door. Empty. The room smelled of damp concrete and dust. The lights were dead. Shadows swallowed the space. My reflection in the dark mirror showed her, Clara, standing behind me. But when I turned, she was gone. I ran, called the police. They investigated. Cameras, metadata, burners, AI-generated content. Clara was revealed as a construct, a fake persona, a digital obsession built over months, a manipulation campaign across multiple victims. Every comforting gesture, every understanding word, every attentiveness was surveillance and control. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple identities, fake profiles, stalking campaigns, digital intrusion. She, or the network, had been inside my life before I even realized. I survived. The basement light was gone. Clara vanished. But the apartment wasn't quiet. I still hear whispers in the hum of appliances, footsteps that don't exist, reflections that feel wrong. Trust became fragile. Privacy a myth. The self, our routines, our comfort, our perceived solitude, is vulnerable in ways we rarely comprehend. I walk the streets now, aware of reflections, neon slicing across wet asphalt, shadows too long, footsteps too close. I learned boundaries aren't just physical. They are digital, psychological, emotional. Obsession can be patient, subtle, intelligent. Memory can betray you, shaping fear into reality. And yet, life continues. I survive. I breathe. I catalog. I remember. And maybe in that remembering there's control. Control over myself, over my fear, over the echoes in the basement that taught me how fragile the line between safety and intrusion really is. Sometimes at 2 a.m., I glance at the basement door. I imagine the flicker. I imagine whispers. And I understand. Vigilance is the only companion worth keeping. The light taught me that fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, observant, waiting in the margins, waiting in the reflections, waiting in the part of you that wants to believe, that wants to trust, that wants to be comforted. And in that patience, the mind changes. Forever. Story 3. Rain tapped the roof in a steady rhythm, echoing through the hollow apartment. Neon reflections from the street below streaked across the walls in muted reds and blues. I sat curled on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling aimlessly. My breakup had left me hollow, and moving across town hadn't filled the emptiness. It just gave it a new address. Silence pressed against the walls like a living weight, punctuated by the low hum of the fridge and distant traffic. It rang the first time at 11:47 p.m. No number, just static. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then a voice came through, distorted, faint, almost playful. "Did you see the rain today?" I froze. "I saw you, by the corner cafe, gray coat, thumb tapping nervously on the cup. You always do that." The words weren't general. They were specific, private, something that should only live in my memory. I dropped the phone. The line went dead. I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted to believe that. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe my exhaustion made reality leak. But the calls continued. Every night at different times, static first, then soft, intimate observations. "You hummed that song you loved as a child, the one in the hall at Grandma's." Or, "You always leave the kettle boiling, even when no one's home." I started noticing shadows in the hallways, movements just beyond vision. Footsteps above, below, though the building was supposed to be mostly empty at night. My apartment felt watched. I met Alex on a dating app. Calm, intelligent, observant. A soft-spoken presence who listened. "It's okay to feel scared," he said one evening over a video call. "You're not overreacting. Not everything has to be controlled." He knew me in ways that felt impossible. Not intimate, safe, reassuring. He mentioned favorite cafes I never listed on social media. A childhood memory I had barely spoken aloud. I rationalized. I told myself it made sense. I wanted to believe it. Then the calls grew closer. The voice came from different devices. My phone, a tablet I had left charging, even the smart speaker I rarely used. Static gave way to whispers that seemed inside the apartment. "You left the window open," it said once, and I hadn't. Sometimes I heard breathing, soft, deliberate, somewhere behind the door, behind the walls, though the hallway was empty. My reflection in the window seemed wrong. Eyes that weren't mine watching. The first night I saw movement, a shadow crossed the kitchen floor while I was in the bathroom. I rationalized again. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I was overthinking. But then came the metadata. Emails I hadn't sent appeared in my drafts. Screenshots of private files showed up on cloud storage I hadn't logged into. Alex, or whoever he really was, seemed to know everything. Routines, favorite music tracks, the precise angle I preferred to read at in bed. I tried to leave. I moved my sleeping schedule, changed passwords, bought a burner phone. He or they adapted. Each new device, each new account, became another channel. The static voice started calling from inside the house. I woke to it on speaker while brushing my teeth. "You should see yourself," it whispered. "You're beautiful when you're scared." My heart pounded. I checked doors, windows, locks. No one was there. I noticed impossible details. Furniture slightly shifted, personal items out of place, subtle scents, cologne, rain, the faint copper of metal. He knew my old nickname, the one my brother used to call me. He knew songs I hummed in the shower, memories I hadn't shared, yet he referenced them casually, as if they were facts of the world. I wanted to believe it was safe. Alex was safe, calm, observant. He texted, "I know it's getting worse. I can help you. I see them too." I believed him. I told myself it made sense. But the spiral continued. Each day, each night, the invasions grew more personal. Social media profiles were mirrored, voice notes of me playing softly on devices I didn't own. Tracking, watching. The city outside, the neon, the wet streets, the distant sirens, became a backdrop for my paranoia. Every floor creak, every humming appliance, every faint jazz note from the cafe below was a signal. I realized one night that the calls were connected to childhood memories, a neighbor I had long forgotten, one who had never really left, a shadow tied to me, quietly observing through decades, through moves, through silence. The confrontation came suddenly. I traced the calls through my burner phone and metadata analysis. The police helped, their faces calm, clinical. We cornered him at the old neighborhood house. Not Alex, but Simon, the neighbor, or the persona he had built over years. Multiple victims, fake identities, decades-long obsession. He had learned to replicate voices, clone devices, track movements, anticipate behavior. The line between care and control had long since vanished. When the door opened, rain poured over him. Neon reflections gleamed off wet pavement. I saw him glance at me once, eyes calm, observant, almost admiring. Then officers stepped in. The world went silent in the rain. Back in my apartment, I left devices unplugged. Windows closed. Shadows stretched across walls, indifferent to relief. I walked slowly, cautiously, listening to the city. Footsteps, hum of machines, distant music. Every sound a reminder of vigilance. I exhaled in the dark Lena's, or in this story, my inner self's presence beside me. My reflection in the glass, though familiar, carried a different weight. Knowledge that privacy is fragile, that obsession can hide in plain sight. I lit a candle. Shadows flickered. Static seemed absent for now. The city hummed outside. Trust, privacy, memory. They are fragile, like neon reflections on rain-slicked streets. And I understood. Survival isn't about being unseen. It's about noticing. Yourself first. Always. The phone remained silent. But the lesson lingered. The midnight caller had gone, yet the echoes stayed. Every sound, every reflection, every heartbeat, a reminder. The world observes. It remembers. And sometimes, all you can do is watch yourself, quietly, endlessly. Story 4. Rain tapped against the apartment windows, soft at first, then heavier, hammering in sync with my heartbeat. Neon from the street below reflected off the wet glass, fractured into shards of color across the walls. I held my baby in one arm, rocking her gently, feeling the warmth of her small body. Outside, the city hummed, distant sirens, tires on slick pavement, faint music drifting from an open cafe. Inside, silence, but not total silence. There was always a rhythm I could feel, a subtle echo in the hall. I had moved here to rebuild. The divorce was final last month. 2 years of trying to hold a life together with someone who stopped seeing me, who criticized everything I did, who left a residue of doubt in every corner of my mind. Now it was just me and her. My apartment was tidy, minimalist, bookshelves, a crib, a single chair. Safe. I told myself it was safe, but the footsteps began. At first, I chalked them up to my imagination. Light taps, slow, deliberate, pacing in the hallway outside the nursery. Not fast, not rushed, like mine, but heavier, slower. I would freeze, holding her close, listening. Stop. And then they would start again. Across the hall, back and forth, over and over. I told myself it was pipes. The building settling. Maybe fatigue. Maybe I was imagining it. One night, I left the baby asleep and followed the sound. Footsteps mirrored mine exactly, delayed by a second, heavier. I walked faster. They matched me. I ran. They didn't. I stopped. They stopped. My chest heaved. I told myself I was overthinking. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I set up cameras, cheap motion sensor cams in the hallway, a small DVR in the living room. That night, I watched from the monitor as a dark shape moved across the floorboards. Not a person, not a shadow cast by light, something darker. It paused outside the nursery door. I held my breath. It tilted its head, almost like curiosity, and then unmistakably it smiled. The smile made me want to throw up. I called the building superintendent the next day. Nothing unusual. The shape wasn't visible during daylight. The apartment had no history of intruders. Nothing. But I could feel it. Every night. Then Evelyn appeared. She came from a dating app one had almost forgotten I used. A profile with soft eyes, calm smile, gentle voice. We met at a cafe. Jazz filtered through the glass, rain tapping the roof above. She asked about my baby, about the apartment, about me. She listened as if she understood everything I didn't even say. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Maybe she was just rare. She remembered my routines, the way I walked through the apartment, the songs I hummed while rocking her, my favorite cafe table near the window. I laughed, unease momentarily forgotten. "You're psychic," I said. She smiled, tilting her head. "Or observant," she replied. I felt comforted. Then came the emails. My Gmail alerted me to strange messages. Metadata indicated they were sent from my own devices, but I hadn't typed them. Notes on my schedule, reminders of habits I hadn't shared. She knew when I brushed my teeth, the order of my morning coffee, even the lullabies I sang. I rationalized. Maybe I had spoken about them to friends. Maybe she just paid attention. I wanted to believe it. Footsteps continued, always pacing the hallway when the baby slept. The cameras recorded it. Dark shape, smiling, waiting. I tried to confront it. I shouted into the hallway, calling its name. Silence. Only the baby's breathing. Only the hum of the fridge. I began sleeping in the living room, phone close, baby monitor active. The shape didn't appear there. Only in the hallway. Only outside the nursery. My world narrowed. Every sound, every flicker of movement became magnified. Rain tapping windows. The refrigerator's hum. My own breathing. Footsteps from neighbors upstairs. Every noise became a potential clue. Evelyn began showing up without warning. Sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at my apartment. She seemed to know what I needed before I did. Coffee, a blanket, reassurance. And yet, small impossibilities surfaced. My personal notes left open, passwords entered in my browser, my burner phone unlocked. She knew things she shouldn't. I started logging everything. Cameras in rooms I never allowed her into. Tracking software on my devices. Voice notes, metadata, AI-generated voice alerts. It all pointed to her. But she was calm, composed, intimate. Always framing herself as protective, concerned, understanding. I told myself it was love. I wanted to believe it. The shape escalated its appearances. Now it lingered longer outside the nursery, paused by my bedroom door, followed me to the kitchen. I watched the monitors in terror, my hands trembling. The smile, it was constant. Watching, judging, familiar. I tried leaving the apartment, staying with friends, even in hotel rooms. But digital traces followed. Emails I hadn't sent, calls I hadn't made, location data from devices I thought were offline. Evelyn had built a network. She could observe me anywhere, everywhere. I felt trapped, invaded, naked in a world that was supposed to be mine. Finally, I confronted her. Calmly. In the cafe, rain tapping against the window, neon flickering across her face. "I know what you're doing," I said. Her smile was quiet, unreadable. "You let me," she replied. "I only knew what you allowed me to see. You left doors open." She admitted it. Multiple identities, multiple victims, a long-term obsession cultivated with precision. She didn't need magic. She had patience, intelligence, digital surveillance, and my own loneliness as a map. Police were involved. Evidence collected. Surveillance footage, emails, AI-generated voice notes, burner phones. Evelyn's persona fractured. She had stalked, manipulated, and invaded lives with meticulous care. The shadow in the hallway wasn't supernatural. It was a reflection of control, obsession, and intimate knowledge weaponized. That night, the last night in the apartment, I watched the shape one final time. Cameras, lights, monitors. It paused outside the nursery door, smiled, and then it disappeared as if satisfied. I moved to a new apartment. Rain still tapped the windows, neon still fractured in puddles. Footsteps still echoed occasionally, but now they were mine. My reflection in the window belonged to me. Almost. Evelyn vanished from my life. Social media accounts, emails, phones, all disconnected. But her imprint remained, in my routines, in my caution, in the way I now measure every sound and shadow. Memory, observation, trust, they're fragile. Identity is negotiable. Safety is never absolute. I watch shadows differently now. I listen differently. I lock doors, hide journals, monitor devices. And yet, every time the rain taps the window, every time neon splinters across a puddle, I feel it. That sense of being observed, of intimacy weaponized. I survived. But survival has a weight, quiet and unseen. The shadow in the hallway is gone, but its lesson lingers. We leave fragments of ourselves everywhere, in devices, in routines, in hearts. And someone may pick them up, rearrange them, inhabit them. Who owns those fragments? Who remembers? Who forgets? And sometimes, late at night, when the apartment is silent except for the hum of the fridge and the baby's breathing, I wonder, if control can be disguised as care, if observation can be dressed as love, then how much of ourselves can we truly protect? Footsteps echo still, but now I walk slower, heavier, conscious. Watching, remembering, surviving. Story 4. Rain tapped against the apartment windows, soft at first, then heavier, hammering in sync with my heartbeat. Neon from the street below reflected off the wet glass, fractured into shards of color across the walls. I held my baby in one arm, rocking her gently, feeling the warmth of her small body. Outside, the city hummed, distant sirens, tires on slick pavement, faint music drifting from an open cafe. Inside, silence, but not total silence. There was always a rhythm I could feel, a subtle echo in the hall. I had moved here to rebuild. The divorce was final last month. 2 years of trying to hold a life together with someone who stopped seeing me, who criticized everything I did, who left a residue of doubt in every corner of my mind. Now it was just me and her. My apartment was tidy, minimalist, bookshelves, a crib, a single chair. Safe. I told myself it was safe, but the footsteps began. At first, I chalked them up to my imagination. Light taps, slow, deliberate, pacing in the hallway outside the nursery. Not fast, not rushed like mine, but heavier, slower. I would freeze, holding her close, listening. Stop. And then they would start again. Across the hall, back and forth, over and over. I told myself it was pipes. The building settling. Maybe fatigue. Maybe I was imagining it. One night, I left the baby asleep and followed the sound. Footsteps mirrored mine exactly, delayed by a second, heavier. I walked faster. They matched me. I ran. They didn't. I stopped. They stopped. My chest heaved. I told myself I was overthinking. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I set up cameras, cheap motion sensor cams in the hallway, a small DVR in the living room. That night, I watched from the monitor as a dark shape moved across the floorboards. Not a person, not a shadow cast by light, something darker. It paused outside the nursery door. I held my breath. It tilted its head, almost like curiosity, and then, unmistakably, it smiled. The smile made me want to throw up. I called the building superintendent the next day. Nothing unusual. The shape wasn't visible during daylight. The apartment had no history of intruders. Nothing. But I could feel it. Every night. Then Evelyn appeared. She came from a dating app one had almost forgotten I used. A profile with soft eyes, calm smile, gentle voice. We met at a cafe. Jazz filtered through the glass, rain tapping the roof above. She asked about my baby, about the apartment, about me. She listened as if she understood everything I didn't even say. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Maybe she was just rare. She remembered my routines, the way I walked through the apartment, the songs I hummed while rocking her, my favorite cafe table near the window. I laughed, unease momentarily forgotten. "You're psychic," I said. She smiled, tilting her head. "Or observant," she replied. I felt comforted. Then came the email. My Gmail alerted me to strange messages. Metadata indicated they were sent from my own devices, but I hadn't typed them. Notes on my schedule, reminders of habits I hadn't shared. She knew when I brushed my teeth, the order of my morning coffee, even the lullabies I sang. I rationalized, maybe I had spoken about them to friends. Maybe she just paid attention. I wanted to believe it. Footsteps continued, always pacing the hallway when the baby slept. The cameras recorded it. Dark shape, smiling, waiting. I tried to confront it. I shouted into the hallway, calling its name. Silence. Only the baby's breathing. Only the hum of the fridge. I began sleeping in the living room, phone close, baby monitor active. The shape didn't appear there. Only in the hallway. Only outside the nursery, my world narrowed. Every sound, every flicker of movement became magnified. Rain tapping windows, the refrigerator's hum, my own breathing, footsteps from neighbors upstairs. Every noise became a potential clue. Evelyn began showing up without warning. Sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at my apartment. She seemed to know what I needed before I did. Coffee, a blanket, reassurance. And yet, small impossibilities surfaced. My personal notes left open, passwords entered in my browser, my burner phone unlocked. She knew things she shouldn't. I started logging everything. Cameras in rooms I never allowed her into. Tracking software on my devices. Voice notes, metadata, AI-generated voice alerts. It all pointed to her. But she was calm, composed, intimate. Always framing herself as protective, concerned, understanding. I told myself it was love. I wanted to believe it. The shape escalated its appearances. Now it lingered longer outside the nursery, paused by my bedroom door, followed me to the kitchen. I watched the monitors in terror, my hands trembling. The smile, it was constant. Watching, judging, familiar. I tried leaving the apartment, staying with friends, even in hotel rooms. But digital traces followed. Emails I hadn't sent, calls I hadn't made, location data from devices I thought were offline. Evelyn had built a network. She could observe me anywhere, everywhere. I felt trapped, invaded, naked in a world that was supposed to be mine. Finally, I confronted her. Calmly. In the cafe, rain tapping against the window, neon flickering across her face. "I know what you're doing," I said. Her smile was quiet, unreadable. "You let me," she replied. "I only knew what you allowed me to see. You left doors open." She admitted it. Multiple identities, multiple victims, a long-term obsession cultivated with precision. She didn't need magic. She had patience, intelligence, digital surveillance, and my own loneliness as a map. Police were involved. Evidence collected. Surveillance footage, emails, AI-generated voice notes, burner phones. Evelyn's persona fractured. She had stalked, manipulated, and invaded lives with meticulous care. The shadow in the hallway wasn't supernatural. It was a reflection of control, obsession, and intimate knowledge weaponized. That night, the last night in the apartment, I watched the shape one final time. Cameras, lights, monitors. It paused outside the nursery door, smiled, and then it disappeared as if satisfied. I moved to a new apartment. Rain still tapped the windows, neon still fractured in puddles. Footsteps still echoed occasionally, but now they were mine. My reflection in the window belonged to me. Almost. Evelyn vanished from my life. Social media accounts, emails, phones, all disconnected. But her imprint remained. In my routines, in my caution, in the way I now measure every sound and shadow. Memory, observation, trust, they are fragile. Identity is negotiable. Safety is never absolute. I watch shadows differently now. I listen differently. I lock doors, hide journals, monitor devices. And yet, every time the rain taps the window, every time neon splinters across a puddle, I feel it. That sense of being observed, of intimacy weaponized. I survived. But survival has a weight, quiet and unseen. The shadow in the hallway is gone, but its lesson lingers. We leave fragments of ourselves everywhere, in devices, in routines, in hearts. And someone may pick them up, rearrange them, inhabit them. Who owns those fragments? Who remembers? Who forgets? And sometimes late at night, when the apartment is silent except for the hum of the fridge and the baby's breathing, I wonder, if control can be disguised as care, if observation can be dressed as love, then how much of ourselves can we truly protect? Footsteps echo still, but now I walk slower, heavier, conscious. Watching, remembering, surviving. Story 5. The house smelled of damp wood and old dust. Rain streaked down the windows in thin, trembling lines, neon reflections from the streetlights flickering across the glass. I carried a box of old photographs up the creaking staircase, my arms trembling with more than the weight of the cardboard. My heart still ached from the divorce, from the months of isolation and nights I had spent staring at ceiling cracks that seemed to whisper reminders of everything I had lost. I told myself moving here would help. Clean the cobwebs out of my head along with the attic. Start over. The attic door at the top of the narrow stairs was different from the rest. Heavy oak, scratched, the kind of wood that seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it. A brass lock glinted dully, jammed from the inside. I pressed my ear against it, half expecting the door to hum back at me, but all I heard was my own shallow breathing. I should have left it alone. The first night, the scratching began. Soft, like fingernails on plaster. I froze in the hallway, the rain hammering against the roof like urgent hands. I told myself it was the old house settling. Old pipes, my imagination. But the sound returned, and then came the whispering, a child's voice, low and trembling, indistinct but urgent. I pressed my back against the door and whispered, "It's fine. It's just the house." I wanted to believe it. Then came Eli. I met him at a cafe near the corner of the street, warm lights reflecting off puddles on the sidewalk. He was polite, soft-spoken, but there was a calm intensity to him, the kind that makes you feel seen without explanation. He asked about the city, about my life, but never pressed too hard. Just listened. "You've been through a lot," he said once, his voice steady. "It's okay to let someone notice." I let him notice. I wanted to. He started showing up in my life predictably, not intrusively. Coffee appointments, bookstore visits, rainy walks along streets slick with light. But little things began to feel uncanny. He knew my favorite bench in the park, the little bakery where I hid from the world. He hummed the song I had sung under my breath the previous week. I told myself it made sense. He was observant, attentive. Maybe I was overthinking. Meanwhile, the attic whispered louder. Scratching, soft sobs, words I almost recognized, names, fragments of conversations, a faint cry that sounded like someone calling for help. I tried to rationalize it. Rodents, old pipes, my own frayed nerves. The nights became restless. My phone buzzed at odd hours. Emails with attachments I hadn't sent. Texts with old nicknames I had forgotten. Voice notes of conversations I hadn't spoken out loud. Eli would glance at my screen calmly, almost knowingly, and say, "I think we're meant to talk about these things." I wanted to believe it. I started leaving cameras around the house, installing trackers on my devices. I checked the attic door again. The scratches seemed deeper, almost deliberate. Then the whispering shifted, more coherent, more directed. "Help me. Don't let him in." The voice wasn't my imagination. It was desperate, human. I called the local historical society. They confirmed rumors I hadn't thought real. A series of disappearances, residents vanishing over decades, all linked to this house. The attic had always been locked, always at the center of the mystery. One evening, Eli came over, and I caught him studying my desk, the drawer I had hidden photographs in. Not just glancing, but memorizing. "I wanted to help you organize these," he said smoothly. "You've kept a lot to yourself." I froze. I should have left, but I told myself it made sense. He was only helping. I wanted to believe it. I stayed awake that night, listening to the attic. Scratching became pacing. Whispers became words. "He's here. Don't trust him." The rain streaked past the window. Neon red reflected in puddles on the floor. My own reflection in the glass seemed to tremble. The next morning, I forced the attic door open. A crowbar I had hidden under the bed made it possible, and the door groaned in protest. Dust and the smell of decay filled my nose. Inside, a small room, filled with shelves of items, photos, letters, trinkets, all eerily familiar, but not mine. Objects belonging to previous residents, some of whom had never been seen again. And then I saw him. Not a shadow, not a ghost, but Eli. Sitting cross-legged, calm, almost smiling, in the corner of the room. "I thought you'd find it eventually," he said softly. "I keep them safe. They were lonely like you." My body trembled. The whispers rose to a chorus of terror. He wasn't protecting anyone. He was collecting lives, obsessing over them, meticulously, patiently, like a spider weaving a web. I ran, down the stairs, into the rain, neon reflections blurring into streaks across the sidewalk. My phone buzzed again. A photo of the attic shelves, taken just minutes ago. I called the police. Evidence in hand, cameras, phone metadata, emails, voice notes. The officers investigated the house. They found the attic, the collection of personal items, and Eli, who had created multiple identities, dating apps, burner phones, and AI voice clones to study and manipulate everyone he fixated on. He was arrested quietly, calm as ever, eyes bright and unbroken. Weeks later, I returned to the house, empty now, silent. The attic door remained locked, but I could still hear faint whispers if I pressed my ear. I moved out, carrying only what I could trust, the clothes on my back, the photographs I had recovered, the memory of fear and clarity. I walked carefully now, through fog, neon rain. I let few inside. I question ordinary kindness. Every interaction is measured, observed. Trust is fragile. Privacy is a currency. Obsession is patient, intelligent, and terrifyingly human. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the faintest scratching in my thoughts. I imagine the attic, shelves filled with lives, waiting for someone patient enough to notice. I remember the whispers, the calm voice that understood me too well, and I wonder, how much of myself do I leave behind in places I think are safe? Because the attic remembers, and so do I. Story 6. Rain glossed the streets like wet glass. Neon signs fractured into puddles, color bleeding into the dark corners of the city. I had just moved into the apartment, a small, quiet unit above a cafe that played soft jazz at night. I liked the hum of life below, even if I didn't join it. I liked the solitude, the emptiness. I had spent months untangling myself after the divorce. After the months, he told me I was too much, too fragile, too broken. The first night, I noticed the mirror in the hallway. Not the bathroom mirror, not the closet, but the tall one leaning against the living room wall. My reflection lingered too long, smiled when I didn't, tilted its head when I kept mine still. I thought I was imagining it. Stress, moving, loneliness. By the third night, it became impossible to ignore. I'd stand at the sink brushing my teeth, and I'd see it behind me, in the corner of the room I wasn't facing. Always still, always patient, watching. I tried rationalizing it. I'm overthinking, I whispered to the apartment. It's just fatigue. The hum of the refrigerator became oppressive. The air conditioner rattled at odd intervals. Footsteps creaked in the hallway above. My phone buzzed with messages I hadn't sent. Metadata in my emails showed times I hadn't been at home. My reflection wasn't just different, it knew me. Then came Noah. He lived on the same floor. Saw me fumbling with boxes, gave me a quiet smile. Offered coffee, conversation, presence. Warm, attentive, calm. Emotionally intelligent. Observant. You're careful, he said once, standing in the rain outside the lobby. But you notice things. Patterns. Shadows. Small details. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. He seemed harmless. Safe. A reprieve from the suffocating silence of my own mind. But he knew things he shouldn't. My favorite mug. The playlist I'd made on nights I hadn't seen anyone. My old nickname from college. The way I tilted my head when I was anxious. He laughed at jokes I had never told aloud. I whispered to myself, maybe I'm overthinking. Yet the reflection grew bolder. It began mimicking not my motions, but my thoughts. Words I hadn't said, rehearsed sentences, confessions I had hidden in the back of my mind. The mirror became a screen of awareness, a witness to everything I thought private. I started noticing impossible details in the apartment. Floorboards creaked when I knew no one had walked there. Doors I locked at night were sometimes ajar in the morning. Voice notes appeared on my phone in my own voice, saying things I had never spoken aloud. One night, as rain tapped my windows, it spoke. You trust him. You think he's safe. Don't you? I froze, heart hammering. The words weren't mine, and yet they were. I moved boxes, rearranged furniture, trying to break the pattern. But the reflection no longer waited just in mirrors. It lingered in corners. It appeared in the reflection of the cafe's windows across the street. It was patient, calculating, always watching. I began documenting everything. Photos of the reflections, screenshots of Noah's subtle knowledge, metadata from emails, social media activity that coincided with my schedule, burner phone numbers, fake profiles. The evidence piled like bricks, heavy and cold. The spiral escalated. Footsteps at night, the hum of the refrigerator echoing like whispers. Jazz music from downstairs warping into a dissonant rhythm. My reflection smiling when I didn't. Always anticipating, always patient. I confronted Noah in the stairwell. Calm, observing, unnervingly intelligent. "I've been patient," he said. "I wanted you to see it, to understand. You're perceptive, worth observing." "You've been stalking me," I whispered. "Watching my apartment, my routines, my life." "Observing," he corrected. "Cataloging, appreciating. You notice, you analyze, you're meticulous. You understand patterns. That's why I chose you." I ran, called the police. They arrived minutes later. Evidence from the apartment, emails, burner phones, and metadata revealed a carefully orchestrated manipulation campaign. Other victims, other apartments, other lives cataloged and observed. Weeks later, I returned to the apartment once it had been cleared. The mirror, the corners, the whispering presence, they were gone. But the memory of them remained. I could still feel the weight of observation, the patient attention, the subtle, invasive intelligence. I moved again. Smaller apartment, higher floor. Safer streets. Tried to reclaim normality. Coffee, work, music. But trust had fractured. Privacy became a construct to be measured. Every shadow, every reflection a reminder. Sometimes, in the rain tapping against windows, I hear a whisper, a reminder that observation can be patient, subtle, intelligent. That identity can be cataloged and dissected without consent. That privacy is fragile, and obsession is enduring. I survived. I rebuilt. But I am not the same. Because once someone has waited, silently and patiently, in the spaces between you and yourself, even the quietest moments become haunted. And sometimes, when neon reflects on the wet streets just right, I see a tilt of the head in the corner of my vision, and I know the waiting never truly ends. Story 7. Rain-slicked streets. Neon reflections dancing in puddles. The city smelled of wet asphalt, coffee from 24-hour cafes, and something faintly metallic in the air. I had just left my apartment, a cramped studio I barely recognized as mine. Divorce papers in the drawer, the hum of the refrigerator, silence heavy around me. I wanted to disappear, to vanish, to be anywhere but here. My phone buzzed. A dating app notification I barely opened. A voice note from someone I no longer trusted. I ignored it, stepped into the night. The rain soaked my hair. My shoes squelched in puddles. Footsteps echoed, distant sirens, faint jazz drifting from a cafe. I flagged a taxi. Ordinary sedan, yellow, unremarkable. Its headlights cut through fog, reflecting on wet windows. "Where to?" The driver's voice was soft, calm, intimate, observant. "Just home," I said, the words hollow. He nodded, started driving. I sank into the seat. Rain tapped the roof, like a Morse code I didn't know how to read. I stared out the window. Shadows flickered. Neon signs shimmered across wet asphalt. Then he spoke. "You grew up on 12th and Hawthorne, didn't you?" I froze. My fingers clenched the seat. "How do you know that?" I whispered. He smiled faintly. Calm, patient. "I noticed. Your hesitation when you said home. Your accent. Small things only someone who's listened closely would catch." I wanted to believe it was coincidence. I told myself it made sense. The car moved, but the streets weren't familiar. The GPS showed me turning in circles through my old neighborhood, but nothing matched. Houses that had burned down years ago. Trees that should have been saplings now enormous, bending strangely. I tried rationalizing it. City reconstruction, detours, odd mapping. I told myself I was overthinking. He hummed a tune. When I had only whistled alone in my kitchen at 3 a.m., the night my ex had shouted and slammed doors. I stiffened. My stomach nodded. "You remember that night, don't you?" he said, quietly, almost tender. I told myself it was coincidence. I wanted to believe it. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Rain never stopped. The city outside warped. Neon stretched. Streetlights flickered like faulty bulbs. He told me about my first crush, my mother's birthday last year, the time I cried alone on the subway. Details I had never posted online, never told anyone. I could have read it somewhere, I said. My voice shook. Maybe a friend. Maybe. He smiled. I've always been careful. I only know what I need to know. I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. The car didn't stop. Houses repeated. Street names blurred. My phone buzzed. Emails from accounts I had never opened. Photos, taken through my window, metadata intact. Voice notes of me humming alone. My routines cataloged, mirrored, anticipated. I pressed the intercom. "Driver, please." He didn't answer, only hummed. The calmness was unnerving, observant, invading. My reflection in the side window rippled. Not mine, another face behind me. I spun, empty, just the seat, the rain, the dashboard glowing in the dark. He reached over gently. "I'm not here to hurt you, only to remember with you, to help you face it." I wanted to believe him. I told myself I was imagining it. Hours or decades slipped. The GPS didn't change. The streets repeated. My childhood home appeared again. Abandoned, burned, exactly as it had been 15 years ago. My reflection in the window merged with shadows I didn't recognize. I remembered the first time he had noticed me online. Dating apps, burner phones, fake profiles, emails crafted like poetry. Always comforting, always attentive, always one step ahead. Each like, each message, each voice note tailored. He knew when I'd sleep, when I'd eat, what music made me weep. I tried to escape. I told him, "Stop the car." He smiled, calm, patient. "We're already home." I realized then the truth. The car had never left my neighborhood, hadn't moved at all. But time, the perception of it, had warped. The taxi became a trap. Each street, each reflection, each whisper of rain through the wipers replayed my trauma. My life, cataloged, distorted. My past stretched into the present. My present into eternity. I screamed once. No one heard. The city outside continued, neon flickering, rain tapping, distant jazz drifting. The climax came suddenly. I managed to reach my phone, call the police. Evidence was everywhere. Logs, metadata, GPS, fake accounts, AI-generated voice notes. He, or they, had been orchestrating this campaign across multiple victims. Constructed identities, long-term obsession, digital surveillance, intimate knowledge, patience. The police arrived. The taxi was impounded. Cameras, sensors, accounts, everything examined. He, Clara? Marcus? His true identity was a network of manipulations, a campaign of obsession and control. He had been inside my life before I even realized it. I survived, but when I returned home, the apartment was different. My fridge hummed. Floor creaks sounded louder. Shadows stretched unnaturally. My reflection in the window felt watched. The taxi, the driver, the endless streets, they were gone. Yet not gone. I learned trust is fragile. Privacy is a construct. Even when you survive, fear lingers in subtle ways. Small, intimate ways. In reflections, in humming appliances, in neon rain-soaked streets. In the whispers of what you thought was comfort. I walk differently now. Observing, cataloging. Shadows, footsteps, reflections, echoes. The city continues. Neon flickers, rain taps, jazz drifts. But I notice. I wait. I remember. The last taxi taught me something. Fear doesn't need volume. Sometimes it is quiet, patient, observant, waiting in reflections, in familiar streets, in those you thought you could trust. And the self, the routines, the comforts, the solitude, we guard only what we see. Everything else can slip in. I breathe. I survive. I catalog. And in that cataloging, I find control. Not over him. Not over the city. Not over time. But over myself. Even if the streets repeat, the neon stretches, the taxi never moves. Even if the past is always present, even if the driver knows, I am here, I am aware, I am changed. And sometimes at night, when I hear distant tires on wet asphalt, I imagine the glow of headlights, the gentle hum of the engine, the calm, observing voice. I shiver, and I remember that vigilance is survival. That privacy is fragile. That obsession is patient. That fear is quiet and always watching. Story 8. Rain pattered against the windows in an irregular rhythm, the neon from the street below smearing across the wet asphalt. I sat in the apartment, alone, coffee lukewarm, scrolling through emails I didn't want to read. My breakup was still bleeding into everything. Empty chairs, half-full cups, walls that felt too close. Silence pressed against me, humming with appliances, the fridge, the radiator, the occasional creak of floorboards. It started subtly, a soft breath through the air vents above the living room. I assumed it was the building settling. Rats, maybe. The kind of thing you convince yourself is mundane. But then came the whispers. Do you remember how you used to leave the kettle boiling? I froze. The voice was low, almost intimate. Specific. I hadn't told anyone about the habit, hadn't written it anywhere. I laughed nervously. I must be hearing things, I muttered to myself. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. The next night, it happened again. More whispers. Names, dates, fragments of conversations I thought private. Memories of my childhood, the ones I rarely spoke about. Details about my ex I had never shared online. My apartment felt smaller, the walls thinner, the shadows closer. I met Julia on a dating app. Calm, observant, attentive, someone who made loneliness feel like it could be understood. Her voice was steady over video calls. You're not overreacting. Some things just feel off for a reason. She mentioned the corner cafe I liked, my favorite jazz track, even my childhood nickname. How could she know? I rationalized. I wanted to believe it was care, not intrusion. I told myself it made sense. The vents changed. They weren't just whispering about habits anymore. They were commenting on me. You shouldn't have left the window open. You laughed too loudly at work today. The plant on your balcony is wilting. My own routines, observed, cataloged, dissected. I tried to escape the spiral. Changed passwords. Got a burner phone. Altered my route to the corner cafe. Julia's attention became obsessive. Comforting, yes, but every message, every call, every mention of details only I should know. Each was a brushstroke in a portrait of intrusion. One night, I was cooking. The vents hummed. The voice whispered, "You always chop vegetables the same way, like your mother taught you." I dropped the knife. My chest thumped. Impossible. I hadn't spoken of her in years. I started noticing patterns. Vents above not connected to my apartment alone. Metadata and emails I didn't send. Photos I hadn't taken. Screenshots of private notes. Someone was tracking, observing, cataloging everything. The city outside, neon, rain-slick streets, distant sirens, felt irrelevant, a blurry backdrop to my paranoia. Then came the movement. Subtle shifts in the floorboards above. Faint, deliberate steps, though the building was mostly empty at night. Shadows in the hallway, though I was alone. Humming, breathing, the fridge buzzing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. I confronted Julia over a video call. "You know things you shouldn't." She smiled softly. "I just notice." I wanted to believe her. I told myself it made sense. The vent whispers escalated. They seemed to move with intention, following me from room to room. The apartment was no longer mine. My reflection in the windows sometimes lagged, showing a fraction too late a movement I had made. I investigated, crawled into the maintenance hatch. Dust, rust, decades-old systems connecting every apartment. And in one section, evidence. Clothing, food wrappers, remnants of someone living above, undetected, watching, waiting. Years of observation. Someone who had memorized every habit, every pattern, every intimate detail. The climax came when I traced the devices, the metadata, the subtle digital footprints. The police accompanied me. Julia was gone, another constructed persona. The stalker had multiple identities. a decades-long obsession with apartment dwellers, a careful, patient manipulation of trust and privacy. The confrontation was clinical. Rain sluiced over the rooftop. The vents were silent now. Neon reflections pooled in puddles. The stalker was calm, collected, almost admiring. His eyes tracked me, observant, intelligent, invasive. Evidence in hand, he was escorted away. Back in the apartment, I left vents covered, devices unplugged. Floors creaked, rain tapped. Distant jazz played faintly from the cafe below. Shadows stretched along the walls, indifferent to my relief. I lit a candle near the windows. Reflections danced. The air smelled faintly of damp concrete and forgotten spaces. I exhaled. Trust is fragile. Privacy is conditional. Obsession can hide in plain sight. Identity can be a mask worn for decades. Survival isn't about walls or locks. It's about noticing constantly yourself. The vents were quiet. For now. But sometimes in the silence, I swear I can hear a soft, deliberate breath. And I remember, someone always watches. Someone always catalogs. And all you can do is remain aware, endlessly, of your own reflection in the world. Story 9. Rain tapped against my window, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the glass in a rhythm that matched my pulse. Neon from the street below fractured across the wet sidewalk, reflecting in puddles like broken memories. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee, old books, and damp fabric. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, scrolling through messages I hadn't sent. I had moved here to start over. Divorce finalized, a decade of trust shattered, leaving me hollow. My friends tried to call, to check in, but I avoided them. Solitude was safer. My apartment was quiet, minimalist, a cocoon. I told myself it was healing. Then the texts began. I can't stop thinking about it. I shouldn't feel this guilty. I'm scared and no one knows. I hadn't written any of them. I didn't know anyone who would. Panic pricked at my chest. I stared at the sender, my own number. My thumb hovered over the screen. Was it a glitch? A prank? My imagination? I told myself it was nothing. I wanted to believe it was nothing. The next message arrived minutes later. You just spilled coffee on the counter, didn't you? My coffee. My kitchen. I had done exactly that seconds ago. I froze. My apartment was empty. Only the hum of the refrigerator, the distant city hum, the rain. My heart thudded. I whispered, maybe I'm imagining it. Over the next few nights, the messages escalated. They recounted things no one else could know. The way I tapped my pen against the table, my habit of humming Claire de Lune while making dinner, the photo I'd hidden of my mother on the top shelf. I tried blocking the number, changing my password, using a burner phone. Nothing worked. The messages came through, always accurate, always immediate. I began recording, documenting every buzz, every alert. My apartment felt alive, listening. I could hear my own breathing over the hum of the heater. Floorboards creaked in rhythm with my own anxious steps. Then she appeared, Emma. Profile picture, calm eyes, subtle smile. She appeared on a dating app one had nearly deleted. She knew my name, my routines, my favorite cafes. She seemed almost present. I agreed to meet at a cafe near the apartment. Rain dripped from her umbrella. Jazz trickled softly from the speakers overhead. She smiled and asked about the texts, about the apartment, about me. She listened without judgment. I wanted to believe her. I told myself it made sense. She remembered details I hadn't shared aloud. My favorite mug, the playlist I hum in the morning, my nickname from college. She asked questions that felt intimate, not invasive. I felt comforted. For the first time in weeks, I relaxed. Then came the impossible details. You left the kitchen light on for exactly 14 minutes. You opened the window and didn't notice the draft. You just checked the top drawer for your keys, didn't you? Messages that arrived instantly moments after each action. My apartment was being observed. Every corner, every habit, every private space recorded and reported. I rationalized, maybe it was a sophisticated glitch. Maybe it was a prank. I wanted to believe it. I set up cameras, small, discreet, hidden in corners. Monitors flickered with static until I saw it. a small phone, wedged behind the baseboard near my bedroom wall. Its screen glowed faintly. A hand I did not recognize tapped the keys, typing messages that appeared on my own phone. The messages, my private thoughts, my fears, my secrets, streamed out as if the phone had a mind of its own. I wanted to leave, but the rain and fog outside, the neon reflections, the city streets empty and slick, felt like a trap. Every exit seemed observed, anticipated, every movement tracked. I realized then that Emma was more than comforting. She was orchestrating it. I had let her in. I had been lonely enough to surrender. She arrived that evening unannounced. Her voice was soft, calm. "I can help," she said. "You need someone who understands you." I froze. How did she know I had found the phone? My journal entries, the notes I had hidden, they were all mentioned in texts she sent in real time. "Maybe I'm overthinking," I muttered, but my chest tightened. She smiled. "You told me to wait. You wanted someone to notice. You left doors open." Her presence was soothing, but the underlying observation was undeniable. Every question, every compliment, every subtle touch had been a probe. She knew my routines, my habits, my hidden fears. I told myself it made sense. I told myself I wanted to believe it. The spiral deepened. The apartment no longer felt like a home. Every creak of the floor, every buzz of a phone, every hum of the heater became a signal, a heartbeat I could not ignore. Texts predicted my movements. Cameras revealed my reflections in windows and mirrors. Metadata confirmed actions I hadn't logged. Emma had constructed a network of surveillance, a web so intimate that even my solitude was invaded. One night, I tried confronting her. I whispered into my phone, calling her to meet. She arrived at the apartment, rain dripping from her coat, calm, observing. "You know I can't be stopped," she said. "You allowed me. You needed me." I realized then, multiple personas, multiple victims, long-term obsession, constructed realities. Emma's attentiveness, her comfort, had been a tool. Every smile, every shared coffee, every moment of warmth had been calculated to draw me deeper, to watch me, to collect me. Police were involved eventually. Evidence compiled, cameras, phones, metadata, AI-generated voice notes. Her digital presence fractured. Identity manipulation, stalking, obsession. The quiet terror was entirely human, entirely achievable. The unsent messages were a product of meticulous observation, technology, and the exploitation of my own vulnerability. I moved to a new apartment, further from the old neighborhood. Rain still tapped windows. Neon reflected in puddles. The apartment hummed with appliances, distant city sounds, footsteps I could no longer track. I could sleep now sometimes, but the lessons remained. Privacy is fragile, trust is negotiable, and our most intimate actions can be observed, recorded, and weaponized. I survive, but I am different. I check reflections. I watch the rain. I measure every sound, every vibration. The traces of my past self linger in technology, in memory, in moments of care I once took for granted. Someone somewhere had picked up fragments of me, traced them, reshaped them, and now, in small ways, I remain under observation. Not by Emma, but by the memory of what she did, by the imprint of surveillance on my mind. I sometimes hear the apartment hum differently at night, and I wonder, which of these texts, these reflections, these shadows belong to me, and which belong to the world outside, observing, waiting, recording? Memory, identity, safety, they are malleable. We leave ourselves everywhere, and someone else may pick up our pieces, reconstruct them, and perhaps smile while doing so. The unsent messages ended when Emma vanished from my life, but her mark remains. I survive, yes, but survival carries its own quiet weight. The weight of knowing how intimate observation can be, how easily trust can be exploited, and how fragile our sense of self truly is when every action, every thought can be watched. Story 10. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the windows, steady, insistent. Neon from the street below bled through the blinds, puddles reflecting a city that felt both distant and intimate. Something was off immediately. The room smelled faintly of ozone and old carpet, like the city had seeped inside overnight. I blinked. The furniture, the bookshelves, the lamp near the sofa. Everything was slightly shifted. The sofa was angled differently, the rug a little askew. A framed photograph I didn't remember hanging on the wall. A city street I didn't recognize, lights blurred into streaks, wet asphalt shining. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe it was the exhaustion, the leftover haze from too many late nights alone. I had moved here to escape everything. A failed marriage, nights spent in apartments that echoed with absence, the constant hum of loneliness pressing against my chest. But the subtle wrongness persisted. The hallway to the kitchen seemed longer than it had yesterday. The door to the bathroom didn't line up as it used to. I stepped lightly, listening. Floorboards creaked underfoot. The refrigerator hummed. The faint sound of jazz drifted from somewhere in the apartment, smooth, melancholy, and completely unfamiliar. I checked my phone. No messages, no notifications. Just the faint echo of a buzz I didn't recognize. A reminder I hadn't set. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I called up a friend, Sam, someone I'd met at a cafe the week before. He was kind, attentive without pressing too much, someone whose presence felt safe in a way I hadn't realized I craved. "You sound off," he said when I answered. "Everything okay at the new place?" I think so," I muttered. "Just weird night. Maybe I'm imagining things." He laughed softly, comforting. "Maybe the apartment's just settling. Or maybe it's just you noticing things you wouldn't before. You've been through a lot. Give yourself a break." I told myself he was right. I wanted to believe it. That night, the noises started. Footsteps in the hallway. Faint breathing near the bedroom door. A shuffle from the living room. I listened, frozen, heart hammering. Rationally, I reminded myself it was an old building. Neighbors' wind pipes. Maybe I was overthinking. But then the impossible details began. Small things. A coffee mug I thought I had thrown out weeks ago, sitting neatly on the counter. My favorite book, open to a page I had never dog-eared, placed atop a stack on the sofa. The photograph, the street I didn't recognize, was now slightly closer to the wall I had measured meticulously the night before. I texted Sam. "I think someone's been here." There was a pause, then a calm reply. "Maybe it's a delivery guy? Cleaner?" I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Over the next few nights, the apartment changed more audibly. Doors appeared where there had been none. Hallways extended beyond their previous dimensions. I opened my bedroom closet and found shelves of objects I didn't own, photographs, letters, trinkets, items I didn't recognize but somehow felt intimately personal. And then I noticed the digital traces. My laptop logged logins I didn't perform, emails sent from my account that I hadn't written, a voice note on my phone, my own voice, whispering confessions I hadn't shared with anyone. Metadata indicated the files had been accessed from inside the building. I called Sam again, voice trembling. "It's inside. I think someone's living here, watching me." He came over the next night, calm, collected, the smell of rain on his coat, wet city streets clinging to him. He moved through the apartment as if he had always lived here, touching objects I had left untouched for weeks, humming the soft jazz that seemed to follow me. "I thought you'd like some company," he said. "You've been so alone." I froze. My rational mind screamed. Every red flag. But the warmth in his voice, the familiarity, the way he seemed to understand the cracks in me, it was intoxicating. I told myself I was overthinking. I wanted to believe it. The escalation was slow, subtle at first. The coffee cup on the counter moved when I turned my back, my jacket draped neatly on the chair I always avoided. Then emails began to include details only I knew. My routines, the late-night runs to the corner store, the old nickname my ex used. Sam's knowledge of my life deepened. He knew my habits, my favorite seat in the cafe, songs I hummed unconsciously, personal memories I had thought buried. I rationalized each one. He's observant, maybe too observant, but safe. I wanted to believe it. The hallucination, or reality, intensified. Hallways stretched impossibly long at night. I opened the front door to leave, and the exit had disappeared. Windows looked like mirrors reflecting spaces I didn't recognize. Footsteps echoed behind me, soft, deliberate. Music through the walls shifted to match the rhythm of my heartbeat. I was trapped in a space that remembered me and reshaped itself around me. One night, I woke to find Sam in the apartment, not just visiting. Sitting on the edge of the sofa, calm, composed. The items I hadn't owned, the photographs, letters, trinkets, were organized into small piles, each labeled in handwriting identical to mine. "I wanted to help you feel safe," he said softly. "I've always known you needed this." I wanted to scream. Instead, I froze. The apartment itself seemed to press in, folding around us, hiding doors, extending hallways, shifting shadows. I started documenting everything. Camera footage, screenshots, timestamps, phone logs, everything. I began mapping the apartment, measuring, recording, noting impossible changes. Sam didn't resist, only observed calmly, almost approvingly. Eventually, I found the truth. Sam had multiple identities online. Burner phones, AI-generated voices, metadata access. He had constructed a network of obsessions, tracking vulnerable people, observing, studying, shaping environments to trap them psychologically. The apartment wasn't haunted, it was curated. I called the police, evidence in hand, recordings, metadata, images of the rearranged apartment. They investigated. Sam was arrested quietly, calm in the presence of law enforcement, eyes bright and unbroken. Multiple victims, all with similar stories, all manipulated over months, even years. I left the apartment weeks later. Silence was jarring. Rain still fell on neon streets, but the apartment itself seemed emptied of its memory. I carried my belongings, my documentation, my fear, and a new understanding of fragility. Now I walk carefully through the city. Fog, neon reflections, cold streets. I let few inside. I check locks, screens, devices, surroundings. Privacy is currency. Trust is fragile. Obsession is patient, intelligent, terrifyingly human. And sometimes, late at night, I remember the hallway stretching impossibly long, the apartment folding itself around me, the soft jazz humming in corners where no speaker existed. I remember Sam's calm, attentive gaze, and I wonder how much of myself can be observed, traced, and subtly manipulated without me noticing. I wanted to believe it was safe. I wanted to believe it was ordinary. But safety is a construction like the apartment, and someone patient enough can always reshape it, layer by layer, until you are trapped in a space you think you know, with someone you think you can trust. Because spaces remember, and people can be remembered too.